You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we are here in our second week discussing NISIOISIN's Decapitation, the first novel in the Zaragoza series. We are going up to and including Fifth Day 1, Lie.
Lies? Isn't it lies? Oh my goodness. No, you're right, it is
it's
lie.
One big lie.
Oh my goodness, it's lie.
One big lie.
This chapter is lie. Oh god.
We have had a second decapitation in our novel Decapitation, and where we've just ended, it sounds like the chef thinks that the hostess of this island is a cannibal who eats people's brains to get smarter.
That sounds right to me. Can I tell you, I kind of love the chef in this book because she's running around being nervous. She cooks like personalized meals for every person on the island. So she's clearly on the ball. But then she comes in with like, yeah, it's also cannibalism. We've all been brought here not so that we can come here, entertain the mistress of the island and leave. It's so that we can be harvested for our succulent brains.
Ooh.
I love it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that theory.
No. I especially like the way that the character list is broken up too, where they've pincered Yayoi, the genius chef, between the two victims of the decapitations. I'm certain that's not why they did it, but I do like that they did it.
You like the implication? She's caught up in something that she couldn't possibly deal with.
Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting where we're standing at the end of these chapters with 4 characters out of the original 12, seemingly all maybe just innocent. Like we've got this sort of alliance that's been formed between Kunagisa and the narrator, who still doesn't have a proper name, and Hikari, the maid that he likes, and the chef who believes in cannibalism.
Believes in cannibalism?
I don't know. That's what happened. She believes in cannibalism. I mean,
the thing is we've set up our alibis so that it's very clear that our list of suspects is like pretty short. For example, the third incident, which we haven't spoken about yet, is that Tomo, the techie that our protagonist Ichan is there with, her computers have been smashed, including both her computers and her workstation, which is very different.
It's very different. Yeah, this is the third murder on the island, and it seems to take place during a period where all of the alive characters are accounted for. They're all like in the dining room. They're like discussing things. So clearly,
it's like there's a 13th person on the island.
That's wild. Clearly, this is a timing problem. We just have to figure out, how the paint was written in Latin. It was written in Latin. Can I say, Flex, if I said that I recognized the word ergo as being of Latin, would you think I was particularly smart? Or would you be insulted? Would I be insulted that you think I would be smart just by recognizing a single word?
I think I would have fallen asleep by the time you got to the end of asking that question. Just like I got to sleep by the end of the explanation of
it's terrible.
Cogito, ergo, propter,
propter hoc.
Just whatever.
Yeah, literally they spend several pages explaining how the paint is actually not a locked room, which is not shocking at all. It's such a backwards way of going about like explaining a locked room that's been unconventionally designed. They're like, actually, this unconventional design doesn't work at all. Like, okay, what was the point? What was the point?
It's and the way that when they're explaining ergo propter hoc, they go through like 14 or so examples of how it works.
14? Not even an exaggeration, no.
It's too many. It becomes more confusing when really all you just need to say is correlation doesn't equal causation.
That would be far too simple for our little Japanese murder mystery here.
I know.
We need to repeat ad nauseum.
That's true. I did want to say Latin, one of the biggest sins this novel's committed, which was bothering me last week, but I didn't quite figure out why.
Yeah.
Is that every time there is an opportunity to repeat something in this book, it is taken, which means that there is no weight to repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is no way for him to create impact other than by only saying something once, which, to be fair, NISIOISIN does at times, and it does stick out, and it does serve that purpose. But if the opposite had been done, it would have been a lot less exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. Could be a much shorter book without the repetitive notions in this book.
I do occasionally take notes while I'm like listening to the text-to-speech voice read the book out, just so that I can like go back over what I've covered, and is really, really funny when you get to bits where it's doing repetition and it's like, has the automatic voice just glitched out?
No.
Has my robot broken, or is the book just this way?
Like, in addition to just phrases being repeated in the same scene, there are also obviously ideas that are repeated over and over again, like the idea that everything is nonsense. That's something that the protagonist frequently thinks when he's starting to reason through the crime.
Oh my goodness, when they hit you with the "It's Only Natural," the all-time Japanese murder mystery classic of "It's Only Natural."
Yeah, it's only natural, it's all nonsense, you're incompetent, classic Japanese murder mystery phrases.
Yes.
I thought they were, native to a single author, but they all seem to just be, it's just a thing. It's just a thing that happens in these light novels and these other novels.
Shizen Daio or whatever.
And yeah, I mean, look, his name is the nonsense user, so you have to assume he'll think at least something is nonsense. He really loves up to his name by just thinking that everything is nonsense right up until the moment where he solves everything, because everything is the key, apparently.
Yeah. There's
also just generally a lot of strangeness in the characterization in this book. The maids in particular stand out because in the chapter called Lie, there is one of the maids, maybe Teruko, corners our protagonist in a room, straddles him, and begins to tell him how disgusting he is.
She came right up against me, pressed right up.
Yeah, that sequence in particular, while it may or may not have something to do with the mystery, there's a lot of talk about body switching and how shocked everyone is that Teruko even speaks a word, and she talks about how she doesn't need her glasses. Like, there's all this stuff that may or may not be useful in solving any mysteries, but like the entire sequence is just completely absurd. Like, I don't know. I wonder if you took the maids out of the novel, if we could just enjoy their absence. Just focus on the characters that really matter.
I mean, I do kind of like that the house staff are actually characters. It's a murder mystery thing to have, the servants be involved with the plot and be suspected, even though it's very illegal to have them actually be suspects in the case.
It's true. Is it though?
I feel like the problem is not that the maids are there and that they take up too much screen time. It's specifically that they take up too much screen time with the protagonist being horny, but also not wanting to deal with people. We have this really weird scene, that same scene with Teruko, where they're talking about how reprehensible Ichan is because he spent the first 10 years of his life locked away or something.
Well, that's something that he poses hypothetically, which
is it though?
Well, that's the question. Oh, it's the deep lore. Yeah, he says, like, hypothetically, maybe I could relate to a situation if I was a child who had been locked away for 10 years with no human contact. And whether this is literally he was locked away for 10 years in the formative years of his life, or if he's referring to the half of 10 years that he spent in the program, for potential geniuses.
Over in Houston.
In Houston, that he's forgotten all of, and he doesn't know how English works. He just forgets everything. He just forgets how language works.
Exactly. He's not very clever at all. He's never going to be able to solve this murder mystery.
Well, we're still waiting on the real detective to show up. Jun Aikawa. Right. They still haven't shown up on the scene. Apparently they're not due for another 3 days.
Which is a little weird. Yeah. But I think the other thing that's really interesting about these like ambiguous facts about characters we get is the whole thing where Teruko, the supposedly silent maid, finally speaks to Ichan. And in their conversation says something to the effect of that the three triplet maids can like switch bodies mentally and share memories. And then she says, I was lying. And then in the next scene with one of her sisters, someone says everything that Teruko said was true.
That's true.
But it's not clear what was relayed to that sister that she is confirming.
Yeah, it's a whole thing where like it's not clear if it's, she was telling the truth literally, or if she's using metaphor, or if there's some supernatural stuff going on. Our fortune teller, Maki's still running around telling that everything will end soon, which is
Yes.
horrifying. There's lots of stuff in this book that is like, is it supernatural or is it real? Or is it just metaphor for a real phenomenon?
And it's interesting too, because we've spoken
Yes.
a bunch in recent episodes about magical realism because it's a fun theme that we enjoy. But there's something about this particular application that just doesn't land for me.
I do want to point out that there is some wild world building going on. And it's not necessarily stuff, I suppose, that NISIOISIN has decided upon at the venturing forth of this first novel, I suppose. It's very much going to be one of those series where you are going to have to figure out what is literal and what is not based on the explorations down the line, because there is some crazy stuff going on in this world.
I think my guess as to why the magical realism kind of isn't working is because it feels disconnected from the themes of the novel.
Sure. How so?
I feel like a lot of what we're exploring through Ichan's perspective is like confidence. And it's a very kind of strange way of portraying it, but how does sharing multiple personalities or being able to tell the future necessarily like play into that? You know, we do have this whole thing where Maki is constantly above any surprise that's happening, so you could say that like connects with that particular theme, but it feels more like it's in ridicule of it than an example of it played out like hyperliterally. I don't know. Like it works, but it's weird.
Yeah, look, I've been pooping on this novel for basically since we started talking about it. But the theme of who isn't a genius and what actually separates those two classifications of people is obviously something that we're interested in exploring. And yeah, there is a lesson about humility, but there is also a strong criticism of both people that are intelligent, let's not use the word genius in this regard, people that are intelligent, but that don't have the confidence to reach the rank of genius, which is our protagonist, and potentially the maids and the other characters who are not labeled as geniuses. But then you have the overconfidence, the arrogance, the flying in the face of the rules that comes with being labeled as a genius by society. So there is a criticism of that labeling itself.
And also there is this theme that like the people with money in the story are more easily able to access genius.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a class critique is what it is. And it's a criticism of the act of labeling someone a genius, whereas the book posits that it's more important to label someone or to treat someone in accordance with their actions rather than their labels of status or that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the more I go about describing the book, the more I'm like, wow, yeah, that works. That's cool. What an idea. How fun. And then every time I sit down and read the book, I'm like, oh, God, stop.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that these ideas are better fleshed out as you go through the series, or maybe they just become more confused. But I think that the central idea that NISIOISIN is poking at, that idea of labels, especially living as someone who is young and full of potential, but not necessarily labeled as someone with worth. You know, he hasn't been labeled as a have or a have not yet at the time that he's writing this novel. And there is definitely a fear of being labeled as one or the other and having that reflect his potential, right?
Yeah.
That's my psychoanalytical reading of the text.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
I know. I'm a genius. I'm sure nobody has ever looked at this book and made the same judgment. But no, I enjoy this book's existence, even if I constantly ridicule it and it is awkward.
Yeah.
It's got the growing pangs of a young teenager learning their place in the world and figuring out what they can do, you know?
I am, despite all of the pain that I am experiencing going through this book, quite enjoying hunting its redeeming qualities, because there are many if they are few and far between.
There aren't many if they are few? What does that mean? That's one of them Latin things. What do you say that in Latin? That's like See, this is the thing. If we said all these stupid lines, like there are many, but they are few, but in Latin, we'd be geniuses.
It sounds so much more clever. You're so right.
That's how we become the geniuses. If we say everything in Latin.
Quick, whip up a translator app and tell me how to say it's really clever if you ignore the 16,000 words of repetition in between each instance of cleverness.
That's too many words.
Sorry.
I'm not. You're gonna have
I've been
to
reading too much
out.
NISIOISIN to be concise recently, Herds.
That's too many. That's too many words. Good Lord. No, the Latin aficionados will have to take that one.
Alrighty. You're listening to Death of the Reader. We are discussing from the tragedy of 0.14 up to Lie.
Lie!
I can't believe that we had to sit here and talk about the consequences of people being taught that pi was rounded to the digit 3. Was that ever actually a thing, Hertz?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't want to answer that question.
Maybe it
but
was
we will
for
talk
a period
more
of
about
time.
decapitation when we return on Death of the Reader in just a second.
Pi is exactly 3.
Exactly 3.
Oh, God.
You're listening to RCR 107.3. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here discussing NISIOISIN's debut murder mystery, Decapitation, the first book in the Zarigoto series, The Blue Savant and the Nonsense User. We are discussing from the tragedy of the trailing digits of pi up until and including the chapter Lie.
Uh-huh.
Why couldn't he just number the chapters, Herds?
Pi and Lie. I mean, that would be too easy. Technically, you could refer them by the day and the part of the day. Like you go 3.1, 3.2.
Oh, no. Don't get me wrong. I actually quite like it. It's just specifically for the purpose of listing them for the show. It's too many words. It's like if you were to try and explain a concept in Latin and then have to put an entire sentence in and shrink it down into one Latin phrase.
Well, the thing is, I actually wouldn't have a problem with calling it by the day and then the part of the day, except that we start on the third day. So saying that we're going to be reading the third day is like not helpful because we've skipped the first and second day. If it started on the first day, okay.
This is all very trivial stuff that is very specific to us trying to explain it on radio.
I'm sorry. Look, I can't help it. That's what we're here for. Literally what we're here for.
Well, you know what else we're here for, Herds? We're here to solve a mystery.
We're here for you to solve the mystery. I already know what's going on. I already know that it all is meaningless and nonsense. But
well, explain that to me, Herds.
Well, that's the whole premise of the novel, is that whatever happens in the novel is rendered meaningless by the fact that it is a work of fiction. Hocto ergo proctus sum. As they say. That was a totally, I want to be clear, that was a totally meaningless phrase. Let's just not even get into the Latin of this. I need to know, from your perspective as the nonsense user's spectator, let's call it, I need you to tell me what's going on in this novel, because now we have 2 decapitations, 1 workstation smashing, so 3 murders really. And you need to tell me who the killer is, the how, and the why. How you feeling over there, Flex? You feeling confident?
I'm feeling pretty confident.
Okay.
I'm missing a little piece of the why.
Oh no. A little piece? That's concerning.
Yeah. The theory doesn't quite have legs, you could say.
What do you mean it doesn't have legs? I thought it wouldn't have shoulders. Tell me about this disappearing murder, because we've basically already gotten the solution to the previous murder, that the paint was not a locked room after all, which is a shocking twist. But now we have the situation where Akane, the previous supposed criminal, innocently charged with the murder of Inami Ibuki, she's been locked inside like a storage closet that the narrator was living in. She's taken up his house.
Yep.
And she's found without a head inside that room. And it seems to be another locked room mystery. There is a window that is impossible to reach from the inside.
Well, no. Okay, let's be very clear here, Herds. We spend a chapter or so saying it's impossible to get to this window.
Yes.
And then we have a scene where we say, well, actually, it was really possible to get to this window if
from the outside
we do all of these dozens of things. It would be like putting a locked room murder mystery where the lock was made with paint, and then you spent 2 chapters saying it was impossible to cross, only to tell us that, oh, well, someone just could have put the paint down at a different time.
I will say I did laugh when we looked at the room from the outside after all of this back and forth, and they finally say the window from the outside could probably be squeezed through if you were careful, and it's also like on the ground because the way that the island slopes. So really, all you'd need to get out of the locked room is one person helping you from the outside.
At the very least, I did want to say I laughed heartily when it was suggested that Shinya was the strongest person on the island. And it wouldn't have made sense if he was the killer, because Akane Sonoyama would have been resisting him pulling on the rope that was strangling her the entire time. Do you want to know why I laughed, Herds?
Why do you laugh?
It's because she would have been helping.
Oh my goodness. She's helping herself to die?
No. She was helping Shinya lift the decapitated corpse of Kanami Ibuki into that room.
You telling me that Akane's not dead?
I'm telling you that Akane is in fact not dead. Who destroyed the computer of Tomo Kunagisa?
It could have been a ghost.
Could have been a ghost. Or it could have been Akane Sonoyama, who was not dead because the body found in that storage room was actually the same body as before. There's even a line in here, Herds, which Ichan thinks to himself, goodness, it's so terrible that we have one locked room and one body after there have been two locked rooms and two bodies. And I thought to myself, well, now, NISIOISIN, aren't you just kind of showing your hand here, sir?
I see. So I guess my question is, because I feel like I get what you're vibing at. You've got this situation where you've got one body, you can simply dig it up, recycle it. You've already said that Shinya is like an accomplice.
They even bury it in a sleeping bag so it wouldn't be dirty.
A cleverly concocted plan, I suppose.
Honestly, I really should have caught on to what they were up to as soon as they put the body in a sleeping bag.
Look, it does make it a bit more convenient to get all the dirt off.
Yeah.
I guess my question then is, because I feel like that helps a bit, but when would Shinya have been running around helping Akane? Because wasn't he talking with Maki, the fortune teller, the entire time?
Well, but he didn't necessarily have to help with the previous murder, because I think in both of these cases this comes down to a timing trick where, because the body is not the one that they think it is, or the paint is not laid when they think it is, that the times the alibis are applied is not actually relevant to when the murder was done.
I see.
Because the time that we're actually worried about, in the first case, it's from when the phone call is made up until when the body is discovered, and it's limited by the paint and the earthquake, but we discover that the paint doesn't actually limit it, and also I think that Shinya is in on the thing, so since he is the one that answered the phone, he could just lie about when Kanami was last heard from. And then in the other case, the conversation that we have with Akane from Ichan's perspective and the conversation that one of the maids has are both from the other side of the door. So Shinya could have been helping put the body in place during or before those conversations so that his alibi isn't relevant for when they think the murder actually happened.
Fair enough. This all makes some level of practical sense to me. I think it's pretty callous to disregard Shinya's feelings having lost his mistress. But I suppose that's fine. You can just say that Shinya, betrayed his mistress in order to help.
Betrayed his mistress?
Kill her, apparently? Yeah. That's pretty callous of you.
Well, my question is, Herds, why was the computer destroyed?
I don't know. You tell me. Clearly has something to do with that watch. I have no guess. No, that's not my job. Isn't that your job? No, it's not. Oh. Look, any guess I could give you at this point would be marred by my own knowledge of future events. I am, like Maki, duty-bound to give only the vaguest of comments.
The only thing that we've seen the computer be used for so far in this story is to store pictures of the corpse, meaning it would be easier to identify, and to receive a report from Cheetah, one of Tomo's fellow hackers, that the rivals that hated each other, Kanami and Akane, met up before they appeared on this island. Why would they do that?
Possibly debating some sort of trivial academic matter.
I reckon what happened, Herds, is that they agreed to change places so that the one who actually died is Akane Sonoyama, and Shinya is helping his mistress in disguise.
Now, why on earth would they do that?
You see, this is where I come up to the bit that I felt I was missing.
Okay.
Because I think the reason they swapped places is because they were having this discussion about how art is not really a true form of genius, and it was sort of that thing where like, oh, trade places with me, see how hard it is to walk in my shoes or whatever. But I don't quite feel that we have the justification for that animosity to get to murder.
Makes sense to me.
Part of me did consider for a moment that if we are going to break one of Nox's rules and have supernatural things in here, Is it in fact the case that Kanami Ibuki wanted to eat Akane's head to claim her genius? I thought about it.
Sounds right to me.
Thought about it for a moment and I went, no, that's silly.
I mean, where else is the head gone, right? Like, if it's not been eaten by someone.
Yeah, I'm a little stuck on that.
Look, that's good. Good to hear. One of the things that we kind of haven't really talked about is that Iria, the person who lives, maybe owns the island, certainly lives there like a prison almost. She's denied the police the access to the island. She hasn't called them. There are all sorts of rumors going on around her and her maids as well. Apparently, Ray, the head maid, was out and about during the first murder, and her mistress covered for her so that only Akane would be the only suspect. And she keeps putting the responsibility on the protagonist for getting Akane killed, even though she is just as culpable for withholding information that Ray didn't have an alibi. There's something going on with his mistress and her maids, clearly. What's going on?
I believe that Ray and Iria have also changed places.
What do you mean? Why? How?
Well, we have all of this talk. We had it introduced way back at the start of the novel in terms of different operating systems having different personalities when it came to computers. And I'm not entirely sure what the thesis that the book is going for here with having people be able to exchange places and no one notice. But I'm pretty sure that Iria is changing place with her maids so that she can see how other people interact with her when it's not her. I don't know. It seems like it's probably a trivial rich person thing to just be like, oh yes, I'll go in disguise and no one will know it's not me. But I don't know much more than that.
Fair enough. It sounds like you've got some who's and how's in your brain, but the why of these things, the ways in which the geniuses operate, seems to be eluding you. Is how it kind of sounds.
Yeah, the motivations are kind of confusing, and especially because the way that it's portrayed is that Kanami Ibuki, her legs don't work. Yes. She's wheelchair bound.
Well, yeah, I'll let you know that when I read this book initially, and I read literally the first chapter, and they mentioned that her legs don't work and her eyesight didn't work until a very short time ago, and suddenly her eyesight is working now. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's weird.
Yeah, it's clearly an act, but it seems like a big ruse to go through for your entire life just to change places with Akane Sonoyama.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd love to know why that would be a thing, but we can always let sleeping dogs lie, as they say. That wasn't a pun. There are no dogs involved in the story. But no, I mean, look, it sounds like you've done a pretty great job. I'll have to have a think about how many points you're getting next week, because it's definitely more than one. I can promise you at least that much. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to kind of add to any other mysteries you may have discovered? Have you finally disproven Maki's psychic ability or figured out the body swapping of the maids? Is there anything else you'd like to kind of comment on before we wrap things up?
No, I think I'm pretty well sorted.
Okay.
I'm going to go with just to have posed a motivation.
Sure.
We have this talk from Akane Sonoyama that she doesn't necessarily mind if she's going to die.
Yeah.
And we've also had this whole thing about what motivates people to kill and what makes people human.
Sure.
If they are killers.
Killers are despicable, is what the protagonist says.
Yeah. I feel like there's a chance it's going to end up being that it is a merciful thing, that Kanami is actually taking Akane's place because Akane feels done with her life. It's a very weird, abstract, rich person way of doing euthanasia, but that still feels incomplete to me. It feels like a kind of whack job solution, but I feel like it's the only one that I can kind of tie in with the themes based on what we've been presented with the characters.
Cool. I mean, look, that's fair enough. It's fair enough. I guess we'll have to see next week then what's really going on, and we'll see how much of your theory holds corpses. We'll have to... It's terrible. Look, I'm excited for it. Yeah, I guess next week we'll be reading up to the very end. up to the epilogue, a flaming fairy tale, which is going to be exciting.
I am looking forward to it.
I'm going to have to deliberate on this one. I'm torn with how many points you're going to get. We're going to have to see.
I guess we will find out next week on Death of the Reader, all the way to the end of Decapitation by NISIOISIN. Thank you for joining us here for your Murder Mystery World Tour on 2SER 107.3.